Hi, I'm Libby Holmgren, Supervisor of the Math Resource Center at JCCC. Welcome to the Introduction to the TI-83 calculator. Before we get started, I suggest that you get the note sheet available in the Math Resource Center. That way you won't have to take notes yourself because they'll already be done for you, and you can concentrate on learning how to actually use the calculator. Okay, let's first of all look at the keyboard layout. You'll notice that all the number keys are gray. So is the decimal point and the negation key. In blue, we see the operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, the enter key. Also in blue, we see the arrow keys up here at the top, and also 5 special keys up at the very top of the calculator, and we'll be talking about most of those as we proceed. You'll notice the yellow second key up at the upper left here. We're going to be using that whenever we would like to access all of the things that are written in yellow above the other keys of the calculator. We also see a green alpha key, and that will be used to locate the letters that are up above most of the other keys of the calculator. Okay, let's go ahead and get started by first of all pressing the on button, which is in the lower left. We're going to do a problem 4 plus 2 times 3. First of all, notice that when I pressed the multiplication button, that what showed up on the screen was an asterisk. This will always be the case. Multiplication will always show up as the asterisk. Let's press enter to get the answer, and we see that that is a little bit to the right and below the problem that I've written. Before we proceed, let's talk about the screen contrast a little bit. If I am outside or under different kinds of lighting, I may want to change the screen contrast. Also, as my batteries begin to get older, I may need to use the screen contrast so that I can see the screen better. In order to change this, I will press the second key and then the up arrow. Now you notice that when you do that, there was a little number in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. My screen is much too dark now, so I'm going to make it lighter by pressing the second key and the down arrow until it's comfortable. I may need to do it a couple of times. Okay, next let's discuss order of operations. This calculator follows the order of operations that we use in mathematics. Everything that is in parentheses gets done first, then the exponents, then the multiplication and division in order from left to right, and last, the addition and subtraction in order from left to right. If we look at the problem that we have just done, we see that the multiplication would get done first, giving us 6, and then the 4 would be added, giving us 10. Let's go on and do another problem. I'm going to do 12 divided by 3 times 4. Now this particular problem only involves division and multiplication. So the calculator is going to do them in order from left to right. 12 divided by 3 is going to get done first, which is 4, and then multiplied by 4. I get 16. Multiplication can be written in another way with this calculator. I'm going to do 12 divided by 3, and I'm going to show my multiplication by putting the 4 in parentheses. Quite often on a piece of paper, if we were writing out this problem, this is the way we would do it. However, the calculator will still do these operations in order from left to right. We're going to have 12 divided by 3, which is 4, and then multiplied by 4, which is 16. Notice on both of these problems that we just did that we pressed the division key on the calculator and that what showed up on the screen of the calculator was a fraction bar. You should get used to this because having a division bar and a fraction bar are going to be the same thing. Let's clear these problems and move on to something else involving the order of operations. We're going to do a problem that has 8 plus 2 divided by 2 plus 3. Type it into your calculator at this time. Now, according to the order of operations that we've been talking about, the division will get done first. That means that the 2 divided by 2 will happen first. Then we will have 8 plus 1 plus 3. So when I press enter, I expect to get 12. Now we're going to do this problem in a couple of other different ways, by placing some parentheses in the problem, and we're going to see how the answer is affected by that. In order to get this problem back again, I could go in and type the whole problem all over again, but I don't have to, because on this particular calculator, I can ask the calculator to give me the previous problem back again without typing it in. I get there by pressing the second key and then Enter, which is kitty corner across the screen, down there on the bottom right. When I do that, I do get the problem back that I was just working with. Well, my intent this time is to put some parentheses around the 8 plus 2 and another set of parentheses around the 2 plus 3 so that we can see what happens. Let's move the cursor over and put it on top of the 8. I need to insert a left parenthesis there. In order to insert something onto this calculator, I'm going to go second, and then notice up above the delete key it says INS. Press that key at this time, and then your left parenthesis. You notice that the parenthesis has occurred. Let's move over now, placing the parenthesis on the division bar, insert the right parenthesis, and it has occurred where I want it. Move ahead, put the cursor on top of the 2. I'm going to insert parentheses there, the same way I've been doing it, and continue on to the right and put a parenthesis on the far right. Okay, let's talk about how the answer is going to be affected by what we did. We've got 2 sets of parentheses. According to order of operations, the things in parentheses get done first. So 8 plus 2 is 10, and 2 plus 3 is 5. 10 divided by 5 is what we intend for this problem to be. When I press Enter, I do get 2. Let's get the problem back by going second, Enter, and we're now going to keep the parentheses on the top but remove the ones on the bottom of this fraction. So move over to the left of the 2, press the delete key, use your arrow key again to put the cursor on the last parenthesis in there, press the delete key, and this is the problem that I would like to do. Well, first of all, before we ask the calculator to give us an answer, let's talk about what we expect will happen. There are still parentheses in the problem. They will be done first, 8 plus 2, which is 10. Then we have division, so that will happen next, and then lastly, the addition. So 10 divided by 2 plus 3 is what we expect. And we do indeed get 8. Well, the last problem that we're going to do involving these numbers is going to be having parentheses around the 2 plus 3, but not at the beginning of the problem. Let's get the problem back again by doing second, Enter, and I'm going to delete the parentheses that are there by moving to the left and taking those parentheses off with the delete key. Moving over, placing my cursor on top of the other parenthesis and hitting delete, I've gotten rid of the parentheses that I want. But now I want to put a set of parentheses around 2 plus 3. So let's place the cursor on the 2, go Insert, left parenthesis, move your cursor over to the far right, put your other parenthesis in. So now we've got a 4th problem. They're all different. At this time, our problem involves addition, division, and something in parentheses. Again, according to the order of operations of mathematics, those things in parentheses will get done first, then the multiplication and division, so our division gets done next, and lastly, we'll have the addition. So 2 plus 3 is 5, then we've got 2 divided by 5, and then the adding to the 8. When I press Enter, I get 8.4, which is indeed the answer. Now I'm kind of tired of the things on the screen, so let's clear them by using this clear key that's located right below the arrows. Next, let's add 2/3 and 4/5 together. I'm going to punch 2 divided by 3 plus 4 divided by 5. Notice that in order to get the fraction bar, I punch the division symbol right up here on the calculator. It shows up on the screen as a fraction bar, but on the calculator keyboard, it looks like the division symbol of the line with the 2 little dots on it. This will always be the case that whenever you want to have a fraction bar, you will hit this division key on the calculator. Now let's go ahead and hit enter and see what happens. This calculator has given us the answer, but it has given it to us in decimal form. We will always get the answer in decimal form. But many times we would like to have a fraction. Particularly on a problem such as this, because we are doing a fraction problem, we probably would like the answer to be in fraction form as well. This calculator will change this decimal into a fraction for us. Let's go ahead and do that at this time. We're going to punch the math key, which is over here on the left, and the first option there, number 1, has an arrow with FRAC. We're going to choose this one by simply pressing enter. And on the screen now, I see ANS with an arrow and then frac. What's going to happen is that the calculator is going to change the previous answer into a fraction when I press enter. And I see that 2/3 plus 4/5 is actually equal to 22/15. Let's do a couple of other problems involving this to-frac option of the calculator. I'm going to punch in 0.145, which is actually 145 thousandths. If I'd like to change that into a fraction, I'm going to go over here again to Math, choose the first option with just pressing enter, press enter again, and I see that 145 thousandths can be written in reduced fractional form as 29/200ths. This calculator will also change repeating decimals into fractions. I'm going to try one now by punching in 0.27, 2727, and so on. I'm going to put lots of 27s in there so that the calculator knows that I do mean this to be a repeating decimal. There will be no doubt. Now I'll go over to Math, choosing that first option, to-frac, press enter, and I see that 0.2727 repeating is actually the fraction 3/11ths. Now remember that I said that you had to put enough of the repeating parts in for the calculator to realize that you do mean this to be a repeating decimal. If I just put in 0.272727 and then I ask the calculator to change this into a fraction, I see that I come up with the same decimal that I had a moment ago. This means that the calculator is not at all convinced that I meant this to be a repeating decimal, and it will simply give us back the original answer. Now the calculator will change rational numbers into fractions. Remember the definition of rational numbers. A rational number is a number that can be written as a fraction. So if I have a decimal that is a repeating decimal or a terminating decimal, I can change it into a fractional form. However, if I give the calculator an irrational number, such as the square root of 2, and I try to change that into a fraction, I'm not going to be able to do it. Let's try that at this time. I'm going to try the square root of 2 and see if I can get the calculator to change it into a fraction. Now to write the square root of 2, I need to access the square root key, which is over here on the left-hand side, written in yellow. In order to get it, I will punch second, then I will press the key that will give me the square root. Next, I'm going to place 2, and I'm going to put a right parenthesis to finish off the problem. Now, if I press enter, I get a pretty good decimal equivalent of the square root of 2, and we sometimes like to know what this is. But if I ask the calculator to go in and change this decimal into a fraction, it's not going to do it, and in fact it's just going to give me that same decimal equivalent back again. Okay, let's clear the screen and move on to an answer capability of this calculator. You'll notice that ANS is down on the bottom of the calculator keyboard, right down here up above the negation key. We're going to be using that to do our problem. In order to do this problem, we're going to involve a problem about compounding. Now in your past studies you may have seen the compounding formula and maybe not, but it is A equals P times 1 plus R over N to the power of NT. We're going to use this formula to do a problem where we suppose that we have a principal of $2,500, an interest rate of 9%, N is going to be 12. This means that there are 12 compoundings in the year, and t is going to be 3, which means that we are going to be compounding this for 3 years. Now when I insert these particular numbers into this formula, I have a equals 2,500 times 1 plus 0.09 over 12, all to the 12 times 3. We're going to ask our calculator to find the answer to this problem. And we can, of course, do it in several different pieces or do it all at once if we want to. You should choose whatever is the most comfortable for you, but I'm going to give you a couple of choices here. A lot of people would like to do this problem by first of all doing what's in parentheses, so we're going to do that. We're going to do 1 plus 0.09 divided by 12, pressing enter. So at this time we have the answer to what is in parentheses. Next I'm going to take this to the power of 12 times 3, which is actually 36. In order to take something to a power, I use this power key located over here on the right, the black button right under clear. And it says that I'm going to take my previous answer to some power. Now since 12 times 3 is 36, I'm just going to punch in 36 now and not mess with that 12 times 3. Pressing enter, I have another level of my problem. Okay, lastly, I need to multiply by 2,500, so I'm going to press the multiplication key, and notice that again, the first thing on this screen is ANS, and that means that I'm going to be using the previous answer, 1.308, and I'm going to be multiplying it by, okay, I'm going to press 2,500 in there, and I get an answer. So the complete answer to this compounding problem would be $3,271.61. Let's do this problem in a little bit different way now. Let's do the part in parentheses first, 1 plus 0.09 divided by 12, get that answer. Okay, now the way that we're going to use the calculator this time is to realize just where we are at this moment. I have that the amount is going to be 2,500 times this answer that's on my screen at this moment to the power of 36. So I'm going to type in 2,500. I want to multiply that times the previous answer. In order to pull the previous answer into my home screen here, I'm going to go second and then go down to the ANS, which is located down here up above the negation key, close my parentheses and say to the power of 36. Now if we have punched everything in correctly, we should get the same answer that we did before with $3,271. And I do get the same answer. So you see that you do have a choice in the way that you can punch in a long problem like this. And it's your choice, whichever way you feel the most comfortable. Well, let's go ahead and clear this screen so we can do another problem. We're going to do a few problems involving subtraction and negation. Now you see that we're going to do a problem that is to subtract a -7. Now these two keys look pretty much the same on the keyboard, but the subtraction button is over here in blue on the far right. The negation key is down here in gray next to the enter button, and it does make a difference which one we choose. Now if we were to write this down on a piece of paper, we might be sloppy and we might make those two signs look really similar to each other, but actually we must remember the difference in them. Our problem is supposed to be to subtract -7, so let's type it in, to subtract -7. Now you notice that on the screen of the calculator it does look like to subtract -7. There's a difference in the way the subtraction looks and the way the negation looks. When I press enter, I do get 9 because to subtract -7 is indeed 2 plus +7, which is 9. Now if we were writing this on a piece of paper, we might be sloppy and we might write something that looks like two negation symbols or two subtraction symbols. Let's see what happens when I do that. If I punch the 2 and then I punch the subtraction symbol twice and then the 7, it may not look too bad. Let's hit enter and see what happens. My calculator tells me that I have error and that it is a syntax error, which means that I have written something the wrong way. Now I have two choices. I can either quit or I can go to the error and it would be the most practical thing for us to do to choose Go To. So let's press the number 2, and I get back to my home screen, and you see that the cursor is blinking where the mistake was. My calculator is telling me that I cannot have 2 subtraction symbols in a row. I know at this point that I should have had a negation symbol right there. So if I simply press the negation symbol now, it will cover up the subtraction symbol which was there, and if I press enter, I do indeed get the answer that I wanted. Now let's try the same problem again by doing 2 and then the negation symbol twice. 2, negation, negation, 7, and if I press enter, it again tells me that I have a syntax error. I don't want to quit. I want to go to the error to see what the calculator has to tell me. So I'm going to press number 2 to go to the error. I see that it is blinking on the first symbol this time, which means that I need to change that one. The calculator is telling me that I shouldn't have a negation symbol just following a number, that I need to have an operation there. So let's type in the subtraction symbol at this time, then hit enter, and I see that I get the correct answer. Let's get rid of this problem by pressing clear, and now we're going to do several problems involving some powers and roots. We're going to do 3 squared, so start off with a 3, and in order to get something squared, I'm going to go over here on the left-hand column. Notice that I do have that x squared button. I'm going to press it at this time, and I'm not going to see an x on my screen. I'm just going to see that the 3 is squared, and it even looks like I'd write it on a piece of paper. Press enter, and you get the 9 that you expect. Let's do 3 to the 3rd power, or 3 cubed. I press my number 3, and I can't see anything on this keyboard that tells me that I can cube something, but I'm going to go into math, and you notice that the 3rd choice there is a little 3. So I can either arrow down to that, press enter, or I could have hit the number 3. Either way, I have 3 cubed on my screen, and I should get 27 when I press enter, and I do. Well, let's see if I want 3 to the 4th power. There is nothing on this calculator keyboard to let me do that, and there are no more keys under math that let me do these other powers. I am going to have to use that power key that I used a few moments ago, located over here under clear, and I'll put the 4 in. So I'm going to use that caret whenever I want a power. When I press enter, I do get the 81. Okay, let's do the square root of 9. Now, a few moments ago, we did a problem involving the square root. Remember that it is located in yellow, up above the x squared key. So I'm going to have to press second, then the square root, and I'm going to put in 9. Now notice that the calculator automatically put a left parenthesis. I need to close that and then enter, and I do get the 3 that I was expecting. Now we want to do the cube root of 27 next. The cube root can be found by going into math, go down to your 4th choice. I'm going to press the number 4, and it pops into my home screen. Let's put in the number 27 and close the parentheses, press enter, and of course the answer is 3. We know that the cube root of 27 is indeed 3. Well, if I want to do a 4th root, I'm going to have to do something a little unique. If you remember, when we went into math, there wasn't anything that said 4th root. But I am going to, in a moment, use this 5th choice, which is kind of the xth root. I wanted to show you that xth root, which is located at 5, but that actually isn't the first thing that I need to do. So at this time, in order for me to get back to that home screen, I'm going to do second quit. Now that means that I'm going to press second, and then quit is right next to it. Okay, I'm back to the home screen. Nothing awful happened, even though it said quit. And remember that the problem that we're trying to do is the 4th root of 81. I'm going to have to press the 4 first. Then I go into that xth root by going to math, choosing the 5th choice, pressing enter, and then I'm going to type in 81. Now it looks a little strange, but this is really how I'm going to have to type in the fourth root of 81. And we know that the answer should be 3, and it is. Well, sometimes we forget about taking the square roots of negative numbers, and we might ask the calculator to do that. So we're going to try the square root of negative 9. Let's do the square root with second. Okay, I have the square root on the keyboard, on the screen, and I'm going to type in negative 9 and close the parentheses. Now when I press enter, I get an error. It actually it doesn't give me a syntax error this time. It tells me that I have a non-real answer. And for those of you that have studied square roots of negative numbers, you remember that the answer is an imaginary number. So it's telling me that it's non-real, which is imaginary. Now I can either go to or quit again, and if I go to, it goes back and it's just blinking on the problem saying, you know, you're going to have to fix this up a little bit. You can't take the square root of a negative number, and no matter how many times I hit enter, it's going to tell me that it's a non-real answer. The TI-83, though, does have the capability of dealing with imaginary numbers, with complex numbers. In order to do that, I'm going to go into Mode. Mode is the key that's located right next to the second key, and I'm going to press it at this time. If I arrow down to the next to the bottom where it says Real, and then arrow over to A plus BI, which denotes complex numbers, press enter, and then go back to my home screen, I'm going to be able to deal with the problem that I had up there a moment ago. So go second, quit, to go back to your home screen, and now let's press enter and see what happens. It tells me that the answer is 3i, and for those of you that have dealt with imaginary numbers, you know this to be the correct answer. So now we can find the square root of a negative number because we are in the complex mode of the calculator. And as a matter of fact, since this calculator is able to deal with complex numbers, let's ask it to do a problem involving those complex numbers. We're going to do 3 plus I, and the I is located down here right above the decimal point in yellow, so I'm going to have to use second. Then I press that decimal point key to get the I, close my parentheses, and I'm going to then multiply this by another complex number, which is going to be 2 minus 5i. And again, in order to get my I, I'm going to go second, and then that decimal key, which has the I above it, close parentheses. Now, if I were to multiply this out by hand using FOIL, it would take me quite a while, but if I press enter, the calculator does the problem for me, and I come up with 11 minus 13i. You can do the multiplication and the division, addition, and subtraction of complex numbers with this calculator. And by the way, this is an improvement over the TI-82. We could not deal with complex numbers on the TI-82, but we can on the TI-83. Let's clear our screen now and move on to another aspect of this calculator. I'm going to deal with the absolute value of negative 5. Now, if I look at this keyboard, I see that I don't see anything that would denote absolute value. It's not on the keys, it's not written in yellow up above anything, but there is a way that we can deal with absolute values. There are a couple of different ways to do this, and one of them is, again, to go into that math key. I'm going to go over now to num. You notice that in the past when we've used this menu, we've used all the things that are on that first math menu. But there are several other choices listed across the top, and I'm going to go over to the one that says num by using the right arrow key. And I get a whole new list on my menu. This time I'm going to choose the first one, which is ABS, and that does, of course, stand for absolute value. So if I press the enter key at this time, the ABS will hop right into my home screen. And if I want to find the absolute value of negative 5, I will press my negative, my 5, and remember to do the right parenthesis, do enter to find the answer, and we of course know that the absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Now that isn't the only place that I can find the absolute value. I can also go into the aspect of the calculator called catalog, and that is located down right above the 0. Now this is an aspect of the calculator that was not available on the TI-82, but if you know anybody that has a TI-85, this aspect is available on that calculator. So it's new on this TI-83. Let's go ahead and get into catalog by doing second and then pressing that 0 key. And we see that we've got lots of things that start with the letter A in the catalog. Now if I arrow down, I see that I continue on through the alphabet, and there are just lots and lots of things that are available through this catalog. Okay, let's use our up arrow key to go back up to ABS, because that is what I want, is absolute value. And I notice that I went a little too far. And when I get up there on the top of the screen, I notice that I've got some symbols. You may want to access these symbols at some time in the future, so remember that the easiest way to get them is to go up above the A's. It's actually like a big loop. Those symbols are at the end of the list. Well, let me arrow down to where I want to be, which is ABS. When I press enter, that ABS is just going to go right into my home screen where I do all my problems. And I'm going to do the problem absolute value of 2 minus 5. Make sure that you close the parentheses, otherwise the calculator will not know whether you wanted the parentheses to be after the 2 and then subtract the 5, or whether you really meant it to be the absolute value of the whole quantity, 2 minus 5. When I press enter, I of course expect to get the absolute value of -3, which is 3, and that is what I get. Okay, another key on this calculator that we haven't looked at yet is the x to the -1. It's located right over here up above x squared. I'm going to type in 2 to the -1 power by pressing first the 2 like I just did and then x to the -1. Now this key behaves just like x squared does. The x doesn't show up on the screen, just the -1. Now think for a minute about what those negative exponents mean in math. If I have 2 to the -1, what I really am going to get is the reciprocal of the 2. So when I press enter, I expect to get 1/2. And I do, but of course it's in decimal form. Let's go over to math, change it into a fraction by choosing number 1, and enter gives me the 1/2. An aspect of this calculator that you do need to know about is scientific notation, so let's go on to that next. I'm going to clear this screen, and I'm going to enter a new problem in. 0.123, which is actually 123 thousandths, divided by the number 456. When I press enter, I get 2.697 something 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 e -4. It looks kind of strange, and it would not be a correct way to answer the problem. If you were to write this down on a piece of paper, you wouldn't want to write 2.697 e -4. What the e -4 means is times 10 to the -4 power. 2.697 e -4 means 2.697 times 10 to the -4. This would be a correct way to write it down. Also remember from your past studies in math that when I have something like this with a power of 10, that it can also be changed into a complete decimal form, and this time it would be 0.0002697. But you will have to do that. The calculator isn't going to do that for you. Another aspect of this calculator that we haven't looked at is finance. And this particular aspect was not available on either of the TI-82 or the TI-85. So let's take a look at it at this time by going into Second, Finance. Finance is located right here up above that x to the -1 key that we just did. And I am into the financial aspect of the calculator. Let's choose number 1, TVM Solver. This stands for Time Value of Money. Now at this time we're going to do a problem where we are going to find the payment necessary to finance a $100,000 mortgage at 7.5% for 30 years, and I'm going to be making my payments at the beginning of every month. N stands for the total number of payments that there will be. So if I'm doing this for 30 years, once a month, I'm going to type in 30 times 12, 30 times 12, and press enter. Now you notice that I could punch 30 times 12 and have the calculator go ahead and multiply for me, and that's just fine. The I% is where I will put the percent of interest, and we have a mortgage that is at 7.5%. I will type 7.5. I don't type in 0.075. Okay, just actually the 7.5. Press enter. The present value of my mortgage is $100,000. So I type that in. The payment has a number in it from a previous problem, and I'm just going to leave that alone for a minute and go down to future value. Now I hope that when I pay off this mortgage that the value will be 0. So let's type in 0, go down, and notice that I can either use my enter or my down key in order to move forward on this calculator, on this screen. P divided by Y means the number of payments per year, and there will be 12, so I type in 12. Move on down to C divided by Y, which is the number of compoundings per year. It is now 12. I could have changed it if I'd like to, but 12 is the appropriate number for our problem. So we'll leave that and go down to the last line. Remember that we were going to make our payments at the beginning of each month, so let's arrow over to begin, press enter, and everything's all set up. Let's arrow on up to the particular thing that I'm looking for, which is payment. Since my cursor is now on payment, I'll be able to get the answer. In order to solve with this TVM solver, you'll have to notice that on your keyboard it says solve right down there at the bottom above enter. And it is written in green, so do alpha, solve, and I see that my calculator tells me that my monthly payments are going to be $694.87. If you haven't done any studies on this already, then you won't be aware of why that negation key is there, but don't worry about it. We do need to simply ignore it at this time and realize that our payment would be $694.87. For those of you that have used a financial calculator in the past, you'll notice that many aspects of this are similar to what you have done before. Okay, let's move along to another aspect of the calculator, which involves storing and also placing several commands on one line. I'm going to get to my home screen by doing second quit. That's always the way I can get back. Remember that quit was right next to the second key. And I'm going to clear so that I can go on to a new topic here. Okay, we're going to look at a triangle that has one leg that has a length of 3 and another leg which has a length of 4, and we're going to ask the calculator to help us find the length of that third side, the long side, which is called the hypotenuse. We will use the Pythagorean theorem, which you remember is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And if I want to solve for c, I can take the square root of the quantity a squared plus b squared. We're going to be typing these things into the calculator screen. And since I do want to do it all on one line instead of doing it in repeated steps, then I'm going to use a colon to allow me to do that. So we're doing several things in this next aspect of the calculator. First of all, we're going to store 3 in for the letter A. So press your number 3, and then in order to store something, I'm going to press STO, which is located over here on the left, up above on. So press store, and since I want it to be in for A, the letter A is located over here up above math. The letters are located in alphabetical order up above the keys of this calculator. Sometimes it's hard for people to find the letters because they're perhaps used to a computer keyboard, but just remember that they are in alphabetical order, starting with A. Now if I want to access A though, because it is written in green, I'm going to have to use my alpha key. So press alpha and then that math key to get the A, and I do indeed have 3 stored for A. I want a colon next, and the colon is located down here on the bottom up above the decimal point. It is also in green, so press alpha, then that decimal point key to get the colon. Next I'm going to store 4 in for B, the same way that I did the 3 stored for A. So 4, press the store key over here on the lower left, Then I want B, so go alpha, and B is located right next to A. So now 4 is stored in for B, and I'm going to do another colon, so alpha, and again the colon is down here on the bottom. And now I'm going to put in the square root of A squared plus B squared. Remember that square root is yellow. Over here on the left, second square root. There's my left parenthesis, and I'm going to put A squared plus B squared. I need alpha A. I'm going to square that by pressing x squared plus, in order to get the B, I'm going to do alpha B, square that with the x squared key, close it with the parentheses on the right, hit enter, and I find that I have found the length of the hypotenuse of this particular triangle. Now let's say that I would like to solve another triangle, but I really don't want to type all of this in again. I don't have to. On this calculator, I can get that problem back again and then work on it. I will go second, and then I need second entry. Entry is down here above enter on the far right lower portion of this keyboard. Press enter, and I see that I get my problem back with a blinking cursor. I can work on that, and I have just moved my cursor up to the 3. I want to put the number 5 here, so just punch the 5 and it will replace the 3. Move on over, and I would like to insert the number 12 here. Now I can just press the number 1. That takes the place of the 4, but you see that my cursor is now blinking on the arrow, and I don't want to cover it up. So let's use insert, second INS, then punch the 2, and when I arrow over, I see that everything is as it should be. I haven't gotten rid of anything accidentally by putting another number in on top of something. If I press enter, I see that I do have the length of the hypotenuse of this new triangle. So you see that by using the colons, I was able to put all of these things on one line, and I didn't have to type in lots and lots of different numbers and symbols again. If you had a lot of different problems that involved the same formula, you could use this capability of the calculator. Just go in with second entry, get the problem back, and put new numbers in time and time again. It's not nearly as tedious to do it this way as it is to type that problem over and over. At this time, let's go ahead and take a look at the catalog capability again. Now let's say that you wanted to change a decimal into a fraction. We've already covered this on the video, but sometime in the future you may want to do it again. And let's say that you forgot how to access the 2frac. You might want to just go into catalog and get it. So let's try it at this time. I'm going to change the number 0.1212 into a fraction. And in order to access 2frac this time, I'm going to go into catalog. So I'll go second, then down here up above the 0, I have catalog. And remember that catalog starts with all of those words that begin with the letter A. Now rather than arrowing down all the way through the alphabet, there is a quicker way to get to the 2frac, for instance. Now 2frac has to do with the letter F, and I will be able to access it by going to the key that has the F above it. So if you look at your calculator keyboard, you'll see that this cosine key here has an F above it. Notice that in your upper right-hand corner of the screen at this time you have a letter A. That means that the calculator is in alpha mode, and if I press this cosine key, my list jumps down to everything that begins with F. Now I don't see that 2frac capability, but if I arrow down now, I will find it, but it won't take near as long as if I had just used my arrow keys from scratch. There it is. Now I'm going to have my arrow pointing to the 2frac, and I'm going to go to my home screen, and I have 2frac. Now what my calculator is doing is changing my previous answer into a fraction. I don't think I want the previous answer changed into a fraction. I want a different number. So let me go ahead and arrow over to the left here, and I'm going to delete that ANS, and I'm going to insert by going second, and that DEL key gives me the INS, and I'm going to put in a repeating decimal here, 0.123, 123, and so on. We already did a repeating decimal earlier. I'm going to do another one. So now my screen looks like a repeating decimal changed into a fraction. When I press enter, I will get the fractional equivalent of that repeating decimal, and I get 41 over 333. Remember that you can find lots of things in the catalog if you forget what other keys to press. Now we have used that second entry aspect of the calculator to get the previous problem back. You can also use this second entry aspect of the calculator to get lots of the different problems that you got before. Let's try it. I'm going to do second, and then that enter key gives me the same problem back, but I do second, enter again, I get the problem right before that. Second, enter, I get the problem before that. Second, enter, the problem before that, and so on. So if you find that you would like to go back to a problem that you had done previously, you can just keep doing this until you find the one that you want. Okay, let's move on to one of our final aspects that we're going to talk about in this introductory tape, and that is using function notation. Let's clear this screen, and at this time I'm going to ask you to press the Y equals key, which is the blue upper left key. Okay, at this time then we're going to put in a function x squared. In order to get the x, I don't need to go down up above the store key. There is an x there, but since x is used so often in math, it has a special key on this calculator, which is right next to alpha. Now I know that it says x, t, theta, and the n, but given the mode that we're in, when we press that key, the x is the key that's going to show up. So press that key, and then I'm going to do y equals x squared, so I go over here to the left-hand side of the keyboard and do my x squared. So I've got y equals x squared. Okay, let's remember that this is the problem that we're trying to evaluate, but let's go back to the home screen with second quit. I want to use the f of x equals x squared that I've got there already, but we're going to find f of 3. At this time, let's hit the vars key, go over to y vars by using your right arrow, choose number 1, which is function, and choose y1 because that's where x squared is. Now it took us 4 keystrokes to get there, but this is a very handy aspect of the calculator, so if you use it a lot, you're going to get used to it. Now I will put a set of parentheses in here around the number 3, and what my calculator will do will be to evaluate that first y function for a value of 3. Pressing enter, I get the 9 that I would have expected. Okay, let's do that once more. I'm going to go to vars, y vars, function, and enter because I want y1. Then I'm going to place another number in there such as 5. And I should get 25, and I do. Let's look at the table aspect of our calculator also using this same function. You see that table is written over here up above graph. We're going to be looking at the table in a moment, but before we look at the table, we want to set the table, and that is over here up above window. So in order to do table set, I do second, then I do where it says table set, and there are several things in here that we can set. Now I would like my table to start with -5. That's a fine thing to start with. I want my delta table, which means the increments, to be 1, and I want my independent variable to be on auto this time, and I will have to set my dependent variable on auto. That's just fine. So change your calculator screen to look like mine on table set, and when it's all set, then let's go ahead and look at table. Second, and then table was over here up above graph, and you automatically get the table that we asked for. You notice that the x values go from -5 on by 1, and that's what we asked for, and the y values are showing up over on the right. Now we asked our calculator to start the table with -5, but if I want to, I can go below that -5 by pressing the up key and going higher on the screen, or I can go lower as well. Okay? Now I use the automatic aspect of my table. Let's look at the ask aspect. So let's go to second table set up here above window. It doesn't matter that I'm starting the table at -2 or that the increment is 1. That doesn't matter, but let's go down here to auto, and on the independent variable go over to ask, and when you have your cursor blinking on ask, hit enter, and now go back to the table. So I'm going to go second, and then table was up here up above graph. I now have a table. It seems to have been cleared because I took it off of the automatic aspect, and I'm going to ask for certain values. And I think I'll try a -4. So I just type in -4. It shows up on the bottom of my calculator screen, but when I press enter, it shows up in the column underneath the X, and automatically under Y1, I get the value of the function, which is 16. Let's put in a couple of other values for X. I think maybe I'll try a 5. I get 25. I'm going to do -2. See, this way I get to do the values I want instead of taking the ones that the calculator would automatically have done. I can even put in a 2/3. Looks like 2/3 there. When I press enter, it of course shows up in decimal form, and it gives me the decimal equivalent of the answer for Y1. And let's try a pretty large number like 1,000. I press enter, and I get the value of the function at that point. Now it says 1e6. Now remember that that means 1 times 10 to the 6th power. If I go ahead and put my cursor on that 1e6, notice at the bottom of the screen that you have the expanded version of that number. Well, we've looked at the table, and I would suggest that you make good use of this. Not all calculators have this capability, and it can be very handy to you in the future. Remember that in order to get back to the home screen, we'll do second quit. Well, this completes the work that we're going to do on the introduction to the TI-83 calculator. In order to turn the calculator off, notice that it says OFF down here above on, and since it is written in yellow, I'm going to have to press second and then that on key to turn the calculator off. Now the calculator will shut off by itself if you don't shut it off, but if you would like to save the batteries, it would be a good idea if you'd shut it off yourself each time that you are done with the calculator. I'd like to remind you about the note sheet that is available to you and that you refer to it in case you forget some of the things that we covered today on this videotape. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention that there is a TI-83 guidebook, and if you refer to this guidebook at times because you're puzzled, you'll find that it is very helpful. I know it would be hard to just read this book from page 1 on, but if you get troubled and look up something in the index, you'll be able to discover how to do certain things on the calculator in the future that we were unable to cover on this videotape today. So go ahead and get started on your TI-83 and enjoy it.